Hi, everyone, and welcome to our speaker series, Alumni Speaker Series. Thank you for joining us. I'm super excited to be interviewing Dr. Matt Tolentino, and he got his master's at UW-Tacoma and then went on to earn his PhD at Virginia Tech and then returned to UW-Tacoma in 2016 as assistant professor in the School of Engineering and Technology, where we're super lucky to have him. And he's also a research associate in the Center for Data Science. He has also worked as a software architect and research scientist at Intel, amongst many other awesome, exciting positions. And he also founded and led the Intelligent Platform and Architecture Lab that focuses on workload analysis for edge computing systems. Locally, he has worked with the Tacoma Fire Department on using technology to protect firefighters through his company, Namatod. So welcome, Dr. Tolentino. Super excited to interview you again. Tell us a little bit about the organization you work for, either your company or UW-Tacoma, all of the above.
Yeah, well, this is for UW-Tacoma, so we'll start there. Right?
Okay, let's do that.
I'm a professor of computer and electrical engineering at UW-Tacoma. Like I said, I lead the research lab, Intelligent Platforms and Architecture, where we focus on integrating analytics and machine learning within cyber-physical systems. I'm also the founder and CEO of Namatod, which is a startup I kicked off 2 years ago now, that really is working on commercializing the work that we did or have been doing in my research lab at UW-Tacoma for the past 4 years. So we're still a fairly early stage company, going through the normal startup sequence of getting our product out there to market, raising money, getting more customers, that kind of thing.
Awesome. And why did you decide to come back to UW-Tacoma for a position?
Oh, I love this place. It's great. It feels a little bit like home. When I left as an early graduate student, like almost 20 years ago now, I moved back to the East Coast. We moved back to the West Coast probably 4 years after that, and continued working at Intel. But I started teaching part-time basis when I was at Intel. I think I taught, 1 day a week or something for the first year. And then by that point, the director at that point was like, hey, can you do a little bit more? And it was amazing at the time when I was still at Intel, because it was a nice escape from corporate labs and offices. It was nice to get back in the classroom, but it was also a great way to identify potential students to come work at Intel, both with me and in other teams that I worked with. So when the opportunity arose to take a faculty position, I transitioned from being on the advisory board to now being a faculty member and pursue the things that I wanted to pursue.
Nice. And what made you choose UW-Tacoma for grad school?
This is kind of a funny story. I didn't initially. I actually didn't know it was there, to be honest. In 2002, the graduate program just got started within computer science, and so I didn't know it was there, even though I worked 15 miles down the road. So I was up at UW Seattle finalizing, my admission to the professional master's program, and somebody up there said, hey, why aren't you going to Tacoma? And I was like, what? I'd only been to the Harmon, right? So Warren Miller and such. And so, to be honest, I didn't know it was there at the time. So I on the drive back from Seattle, I stopped in Tacoma and ended up meeting with, some of the graduate advisors there. And the program was literally just getting started. It was the first graduate class. So I immediately transitioned over to join the Tacoma program. But
That's awesome.
initially, I didn't know. So
I see. I
I'm
see.
really glad I found it. It was it saved me a lot of time, and I got to meet a lot of interesting people here.
Absolutely. And I hear there's rumors of a PhD program in computer science starting up at UW sometime in the relatively near future. So
Yeah, how does the press release stuff work for that? I don't know,
I
but
don't know. I don't think it's been released, but I've heard rumors, which I'm super excited about.
I've heard
What
the same rumors. Yeah.
what go figure. What inspired you to go back to get a PhD?
Part of that was my time at UW Tacoma. So,
Hmm.
I didn't actually have any intention of getting a PhD when I joined the graduate program. I was advised that I should pursue a graduate degree, and of course for me, Intel paid for all of that. But um, it was really the I think it also I think my time at UW Tacoma kind of kicked off intellectual curiosity and kind of opened up my eyes to the kinds of things that are possible if you take a more research bent on things rather than strictly productizing things. And so so I credit at least part of my time at UW Tacoma as sort of sparking that interest and pursuing that further.
That's awesome. What would you say your most significant learning experience was at UW Tacoma as a student?
As a student, okay, this is a little embarrassing, but I
We are being recorded.
yeah, yeah. Nothing too bad. But I think that as a beginning graduate student, I thought that I knew more than I did, and I think that's probably typical. And I remember being what was it? There's a seminar that you have to take, right, as
Hmm.
part of the graduate program, and it turns out that's common across all of them. I had to do another seminar at Virginia Tech when I did their program, but part of that seminar was reading, I don't know, 20, 25 papers, and the level of depth of each of those papers was different, right? Everything from fairly popular articles to some classic Shannon information theory stuff. And this was actually Josh Tannenberg's class, who's still here, right?
Oh, hey, yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think that's part of. I think that was a significant learning experience. I think I came into it a little bit cocky, like, "Hey, I've been working. I know what's going on."
Hmm.
And there's this whole other world there that I didn't know that much about, and so it kind of opened my eyes to kind of what kinds of things were possible and what kind of tracks you could go on, if you weren't just focused on commercializing product, but more pure research, if you will.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
so I think that was certainly a part of it. I think the thesis aspect or the thesis portion of the graduate program was particularly important because that was the first time that I forged a direction and decided what to do and how that should progress. So I think that was pretty critical too. Other classes just kind of rounded things out, in terms of um, increasing the breadth of knowledge across an area, right? Some things I would never probably do again, but were certainly interesting at the time. So.
And you mentioned already Professor Tenenberg, but who were some of the professors, mentors, or people in your life at that time that added to your experience at UW?
Yeah, Josh was really great. His whole demeanor and kind of approach to learning and research in general, I think was pretty influential. The This guy that I worked for at the time, Dave Patterson at Intel, was incredibly influential. He was the one who was like, "No, you should go do this." And later, when I came back to him 2 years later and said, "Yeah, I'm not quite done yet," he was the one that enabled me to go pursue a PhD. And so he's actually had a huge influence on my life, and career. If I could just have gotten him to be CEO of a company with me, that would have been excellent. That hasn't worked out. No, I think that there used to be another faculty member back in the 0203 timeframe, Rogine Eichler West. I actually don't know where she went now. I think initially she went to Yahoo or eBay or something like that. She left after a couple of years, but kind of seeing how she forged her own path, I think was pretty influential. I can't say anything without I can't not talk about George Mobus. George
Sure.
George is a funny guy. I really like George, and he's the one that officially signed my master's thesis before I had to take it up to Seattle. There was no electronic submission. You had to take it to this woman up in Seattle who had a ruler, a little bit. George was incredibly supportive at the time, and so and still is. But yeah, I think those are the the primary people. I think Dave really kind of drove things home. Of course, he was not part of UW Tacoma, but later, most recently, he was serving on our advisory board for engineering. So it's kind of interesting to bring him back into the fold.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a copy of System Science signed by Dr. Mobus as well. So
Yeah.
yes, I do. Yeah. If you could go back in time and do it all over, what would you do differently? You mentioned a little bit about maybe showing up with a little more humility, perhaps, than might have been there. But what else might you have changed,
Yeah,
if
humility,
anything?
more of an open mind. I think to be honest, I probably would have taken more risks earlier. So, I think that maybe that was a function of the time, the early 2000s. Maybe not. I don't know. It was an interesting time. I think that there were some points I could have exited Intel and left sooner rather than spending 15 years there. Part of me kind of regrets maybe not doing that sooner, but there's just so many interesting things to try. I think we were just talking about this.
Yes, we were. And it's very true.
Yeah, in terms of, I don't know, I've had a lot of pivots in my life. I've everything from, I think I was mentioning this in a mail, right? From being a professional figure skater to, some time with the military and DoD, and now industry and startups. I mean, there's just so many things to do, and kind of trying some of those things out, and at least for 2, 3, 4 years, and then seeing if that fits, and seeing is there something else you can try. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe moving on sooner. I don't know.
Fair enough.
That being said, I don't know that I want to do that now, but there's still interesting things to try, right?
Absolutely.
I think the startup is one of those, right? I really like my faculty position, but it's really exciting to be in a place where that's supportive of trying new things and taking risks that may or may not pay off, but still being able to come back to that and go, okay, let's try the next thing. This kind of environment enables that. So that's pretty exciting now.
Definitely. How did your experience at UW Tacoma influence your career pursuits after graduation, would you say? I mean, obviously you're there.
I don't know that I went too far. Well, I did, but then I came back. So I think that the biggest thing was again, kind of coming back to that sparking an interest in more pure research.
Mhm.
That certainly changed the positions that I then sought at and held in Intel after that, and then certainly in terms of the startups I've been engaged with ever since, right? So really that started in grad school at UW Tacoma. It was just amplified at Virginia Tech, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, don't spend 2 years here, spend 4 years here, and go deeper. But I think that started at UW Tacoma. To be honest, I kind of wish that some of the faculty that are here now that I work with, had been here then, right? So,
Mhm.
back then we had a very few. There weren't nearly as many faculty, and so there was. There's just a lot more opportunity now. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm kind of jealous of current graduate students. Like, you can go talk to all kinds of interesting people across a broad range of fields. So if you're gonna go talk, cryptography, go talk to Anderson or Pollock, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go talk to distributed systems, go talk to Wes, power engineering, go talk to Vahid, right? Or control systems, go talk to Jenny or Mike. And so there's a really broad, group here now that, certainly my experience is influenced by my time at UW to come with a limited set of faculty. So, for future students, I think there's some amazing opportunities to have a great experience here.
Definitely. So because you have had a lot of different work experiences, I think this is a great question for you. What would you say to students that are nervous about not working specifically in their field of study?
Oh, geez. Not in their field of study. That's great. so we because even some of the work that I did in my PhD, and even since then, I mean, everything's a growing opportunity. There's so many opportunities to take something from a different area and then bring it into what you do. And so working outside of your area in another area, is going to give you some insights that you won't necessarily get unless you do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I hadn't done anything in control systems, right? Before I was in graduate school, right? And that was not at UW-Tacoma, that was at Virginia Tech. And so, that kind of forced me to go over to the industrial and system engineering division there and go, okay, I need to learn control systems. So let me go talk to those people. I did some work, I think Harry will probably remember this. There was a guy named Gons at Intel that was doing all this, bioinformatics work and genetic analysis work. And so that, I was like, okay, I don't know anything about that. Let me go learn about that. And then you bring that back. And there's always some unique idea or, a process that's normal to them, right, to that other area that, you don't necessarily learn in your own field. And so I think that that's the most exciting thing, is to go in those other areas, not just the pure areas, but bring them back, right? Yeah, it's a little bit painful, right? But it's so worth it, because there's some unique perspective that you can't get otherwise.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. I think that going outside of your areas is interesting, and I think that some of our areas are so combined. I mean, I'm still doing a whole bunch of stuff in that I shouldn't be doing in mechanical engineering, right? That technically, I guess I'm not qualified for, but we can figure those things out. So, but you learn so much more when you come at it from your perspective and then consider another perspective and other approaches, and then try to integrate those two things. That's the real power, in true innovation now, is right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. I think it's in that synthesis that innovation actually does happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So go work with some other people, right?
Right.
And be the, I don't want to say dumb one in the room. I'd say I've been the dumb one in the room a lot. And God, there's David Hirschberg up at Rain. That guy astounds me. I love to go talk to him, because he starts talking about all this, DNA, RNA, PCA, all these different biological phenomena, and some of them I understand now, some of them I still don't understand. But then there's always a piece in there you can take out and go, oh, wait a minute, I can do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm.
I know something about that. Let's combine those things. So I think that those are where the most interesting things happen.
Definitely. Okay, we're on to your favorite question. Are you ready for this? If you compare your work environment to a TV show, which one would it be?
Okay, so this is where it's really nice to be able to pick a work environment.
That's true. You have lots of options.
I don't have tenure yet, so I'm going to say I'm not going to talk about UW-Tacoma on this respect. But I will talk about the startup stuff. And it's so funny, because I left Intel in 2015 and I joined a startup out of Tel Aviv, and some great people over there. I had great fun doing it, but it was right about the time that Silicon Valley came out.
Oh, yes.
And I will tell you that all of that is accurate, right? Well, maybe not all of it, but at least let's say the season one, right? you know, the confusion, frustration, the roller coaster of things going right and things going wrong and not knowing what you're doing, you know, it's just so spot on, at least in some cases. So, um, so I'd have to say, from a startup perspective, it'd be Silicon Valley. You know, yeah, I'll leave it there.
That's awesome. I'm definitely a Guilfoyle, so. Um, and is there something that happens in your day-to-day work that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, I think that happens all the time. You know, that's the cool part about research, right? Is that you know, I think that there's this thought that, like, okay, we've got some grand plan as to how things are going to progress, and most of the time we, you know, that we know exactly how things are going to go, right? And that's the coolest part about research, is you have no idea, right? I mean, you have some idea, but
Mhm.
but you know, radical things can happen, that are completely unexpected, and that's where the real insights come from. You know, I just kind of describe it as, I, you know, well, what do you do? Well, I stumble around in the dark and try to think of solutions, right, to problems. So what are the problems? Well, I don't know yet, but I'm dealing with one problem, and once I finish that one, I'll get to the next one, and maybe I can tell you in a couple of years. But you know, things happen that are unexpected all the time. You know, we thought that, for example, I was doing a demo in the fall, over at the port of Tacoma, with a bunch of fire and police officers, and they were like, I was showing them this device, and they're like, okay, well, you know, what if we step on it? You know, what if we're 250, you know, 300 pounds with gear, a guy steps on it? And I'm like, I don't know. And so I threw it on the ground and tried it, right? So I didn't know what was going to happen, but it might have been a little embarrassing, but it wasn't. And so,
I was
but
like,
things
did it hold?
it did. I was actually really surprised, but because I did not design it for that. But you know, interesting things happen like that all the time. Some of them, you know, while you're doing some math, that you don't expect, that you need to invent something new, or, you know, when you're actually trying something out, live, you know, in the field.
Mhm.
Um, you know, some of the devices that we built, for a demo fire last year, you know, I didn't think that they would live as long as they did. And firefighters went in and retrieved them. They're completely melted around all the boards. It was super cool looking, but I didn't expect that, right? And it was still working. So, yeah, I didn't plan for that. You know, the work that I've been doing most recently, in localization, I never could have predicted that I would have, you know, a pipeline like I do now, right? That this
Mhm.
would look like it does now, or be composed the way it is. And so I think unexpected things happen all the time. What's most unexpected? I don't know. Sometimes it's when things work. So that's always a really nice surprise. But more often it doesn't work. So you just have to keep trying. But yeah, just keep going.
So, continuing along the lines of unexpected events, can you talk a little bit about how COVID-19 has impacted your daily life?
Yeah, traffic's amazing. Can't buy a bunch of stuff now. I don't know. No, it's. I think for me, so I've been kind of busy. Added another dimension to the workload that I have. You know, in addition to the startup and research and teaching, we've also been, you know, printing face shields in our lab. So, you know, as soon as this is before the quarantine started, and really when classes stopped, you know, with some help from John Burkhart, and advancement, you know, ended up connecting with UW Medicine and UW Bothell and UW Seattle, and started, you know, repurposing a lot of fabrication equipment, that the school had just recently bought. And mostly for my classes, right, in senior design. And now, of course, the students can't use that equipment, because they can't come on campus. And so, you know, we ended up repurposing that to producing face shields and you know, face masks for healthcare providers, right? So,
Mhm.
um, you know, so that changed things a little bit, because, well, it changed things a lot, because you know, our focus kind of shifted over there. I set aside some other things, and then we kind of worked on building these face shields, and then delivering them up to UW Medicine, up to the hospital. So that certainly changed things. The class online thing, of course, that
Yeah.
changed things. From a company perspective, it changed some things. Some of my contracts got put on hold, but then I got some other new ones. So it has changed things. It's also changed kind of the focus. I think there's a lot of opportunities right now, given these changes, and who's to say how permanent these things are going to be, but at least some of our perspectives are changing on that. So how does that change how we work? How does that change how we play? And then from a technology perspective, how does that change how we integrate technology into our daily lives, right? I work on a lot of cyber physical systems, so interaction with the physical environment, whether that's wearable devices or sensors to determine temperature, your temperature, how the performance of a person, right? So I think that's changed how started to change how I think about approaching some of those problems. Could we approach those things differently, right?
Yeah.
It's opened up new problems, right? So in working with David Hirschberg up at Rain, and Stan, they've been doing some really gross stuff that's amazing, in terms of Tacoma sewage, right? And tracking COVID through the sewers, right? So he tells me about that, and when we start talking about it, it's like, man, I really like to not have to go down to the sewers all the time, right? And like, okay, well, how can we create a device to do that in an automated way, right? So would I have thought of sewers as an opportunity 4 months ago or 3 months ago? No, right? But just keep rolling with it, right? So and finding these new opportunities. So I think it brings opportunity, right?
Yeah, I definitely found that keeping busy is helping me from going insane in my house, basically. So I agree with you there. Would you say that that's something that's working for you in terms of protecting your mental health during the stay-at-home order, or what else are you doing as far as protecting your mental health? And
I'm just busy. It's just added to the workload. To be honest, I'm still coming to work most days. And that's kind of ironic. I mean, the last, at least the last 5 years, probably the last 10 years, of my 15 years at Intel, I worked at home a lot, right? So it's kind of the opposite now. I'm actually working in the office more than I did before.
Interesting.
Because we're, doing stuff with some of the PPE and putting those things there. So, but yeah, I think, but it's also difficult to not go out and go to restaurants, right? And
right.
go have some downtime, right? The downtime's changed, lots of Zoom. So, I'm not sure how good that's for your mental health, but but
well, it's one way to stay connected, right?
It is one way, yeah. So there might have been some happy hours like that. So, but yeah.
And we're actually up to the last official question. What is one piece of advice that you would give to current students?
2 parts then, if it's one question.
Yeah, absolutely.
2 parts. Figure out what interests you most, right? And recognize the fact that may change over time. And whatever that is, try to go pursue that, right? Sometimes that means, you don't make as much money at some place, right? But if it keeps getting you up in the morning, right? And, it keeps you thinking about things throughout the day and working on solving problems, then that's an important position to keep, right? That's something to pursue. And so the other thing is just perseverance. I think when I was talking to you last week, we were, I mentioned, there's this great talk, the last lecture by Randy Posh, CS faculty at CMU, who died of pancreatic cancer. And in there, he keeps talking about how, life will put up these walls in front of you, right? And the walls are there to keep people out who don't want it enough, right? And so, that certainly rings true with things that I've done, right? There's lots of times where you could have exited, right? And said, well, I don't know, that didn't work. So maybe it just doesn't work. And, there's a limit to that. But I think that, there are so many cases, there are many more cases where you just have to keep after it, right? Keep trying things. Think of the Edison thing about the light bulb. You just have to keep trying. There's got to be some way. And it's certainly proven true both in work I've done, in industry, in government, and now academia and startups. And, I hit that wall, I think, repeatedly for the first year I was working on this project for my company. And, there are a lot of times I could have just said, well, I don't know, it doesn't work. And because I didn't, now I'm in it someplace, this whole area of work is in a place that I never would have predicted. And so you have to remember that you have to kind of redefine failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think this was one of the other questions before was, is it really failure? What is failure? How do you view failure? And, there's a positive and negative way of looking at that. And I think you have to keep on the positive side of that and say, well, I don't know, that didn't work. So let me try the next thing. Now I know what doesn't work. So on the stuff that I've been working on, I can tell you 100 ways that this won't work. And that helps build your experience and your knowledge base of a space. And that's what makes you an expert, right? Is not letting those walls slow you down or stop you, right? Just keep going. Whether it's hard classes, let me take some other class because it's easier. No, it's the wrong thing to do, right? You should take the hard one, right? Because that's what's going to challenge you. That's what's going to push you outside your comfort zone. So I'm a big advocate of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Go someplace where you don't know things. And you're not the dumbest person in the room, but you're the person who doesn't know as much as the other people in the room. Go find those people and hang out with them, right? And address those challenges. So, perseverance is just absolutely key. So I think you just have to keep pushing.
Excellent. Excellent advice. Thank you so much. And we are going to open it up for Q&A. So if you could please type in your questions. Sorry, I had some feedback. If you could type in your questions, I'll go ahead and ask them. And we have a question from, they're already going. One sec. Okay. So Ms. Lawson writes, some people say that COVID-19 has left many people without jobs or opportunities because they may not have had the skills to use technology, such as senior citizens and others who have not worked in jobs that used advanced technology. What do you feel about that? And what do you feel can be done about that, particularly in STEM jobs and careers? So for people that may not have the skills to use that technology.
Well, I think that relates to a broader issue. I think that's an instance of a broader issue that often comes up, particularly with respect to technology. Some of the workforce automation, arguments are like, okay, if we automate, this factory, right, then those jobs that people, if you automate a factory, you're replacing people with machines, right, that are basically taking away those jobs, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, that's one way of looking at it. I think that there's another way of looking at it is that those machines or those technologies have to be built, right? They have to be built, they have to be controlled, they have to be maintained, they have to be managed. So I often wonder if it isn't, killing those jobs, right? If it isn't really just changing those jobs, right? And I think if you're open to, to pivoting, right? And of course, I'm an extreme form of pivoting, right? But I think you have to be kind of open to pivoting and going, okay, well, yes, I know that's how we've done things, but maybe there's a different way we can look at this, right? Maybe there's a different way we can do that. I think for STEM jobs and careers, this is offering a huge opportunity. Like, I think this pandemic is like the poster child for why you should be interested in STEM areas, right? With Twitter saying, hey, all of our positions or most of our positions are now going to be remote. Well, okay, so somebody's got to develop the software, maybe, Zoom 2.0, right? Or whatever follows Zoom, right? Or Microsoft Teams or Facebook what are they calling it? Spaces or something. I can't remember what they're calling it. But
Oh
everybody,
yeah, they
yeah,
all have their own version of it. So
right. And so, and there's going to be a lot more, right? And there's a lot more remote opportunities. They're going to be available, to even broader geographic areas. So I think you have to have those skills. If you don't have them now, I think you're going to have to start adjusting to it, right? And at least considering how you can participate in that space. Are things going to go back to normal? I sure hope so. But this may actually show us that there are some different ways to do things that we should be considering integrating, right? And so from a STEM perspective, I think this is a good thing. Pandemic's not good, but there are opportunities here, right? Certainly in technology, biology, chemistry, like just all of the scientific disciplines, quite frankly.
yeah.
And so, and then for liberal arts as well, because, quite frankly, some of us engineers and scientists aren't necessarily the best at communicating, and we need help with that, right? So all of us working together, I think that if we all think about how that pivots and kind of don't hang on to the past, right, then it may be easier to embrace those new things. You have to pivot. You just have to pivot.
Gotta pivot. I spend my life pivoting, so I'm all about the pivot too. Leslie asks, Matt, one could say you represent the heart of innovation at UW Tacoma. What do you incorporate into your daily routines to stay inspired and ready to pounce on the next opportunity?
The heart of innovation. Oh, she's too nice. I think into my daily routine, I start the day with a whole bunch of espresso, and then I start reading. So I tend to read, a lot of recent news, and then I have a list of things that I need to read about certain areas. I'm always looking at what other people are doing or what companies are doing in other spaces, and then try to think about, well, okay, so that's interesting now. What does that look like in 5 or 10 years, right? And I think we were talking about this last week. My personality is such that I tend to chase shiny objects, and sometimes you create those shiny objects. And so if you have some idea, it's kind of like this fire thing. Like, I didn't plan for this. I had no intention of working with firefighters, although it's really amazing. But 4 years ago, I wasn't doing that at all. I was like, okay, so tell me what your problem is. Like, help me understand. I don't know anything about firefighting. Like, I'm a ski patroller, but I don't know anything about firefighting. So how does that work? And what does that mean to you? And what keeps you up at night? And kind of asking those kinds of questions all the time, right, from people in different areas and that do different things than you do, often provides the problems. And then you can think about, okay, well, how would I solve that, right? Or how would I address that? How should I even think about that? Oh, let me go think about some ways and go look at some ways that are some aspects of that I could consider, right? So, but also knowing what people are doing, and what's going on in different spaces. That takes time, but then once you kind of get the pulse of it, you can kind of, it becomes easier to gauge over time, right? Find some experts, right? And get them to school you, right? So, like there's somebody I love to talk to in Tacoma, Rob Meyerson, right? Who used to lead Blue Origin, and the Blue Origin stuff is very interesting, and kind of all their failures in the or challenges in building reusable rockets. But then even hearing some of his stories about, how things were going at Houston when he was at NASA, right? Working on the recovery chutes and stuff. I mean, there's always something interesting in there that, can spark something new and provide the next opportunity. Then you just have to go do something. The pouncing part on it, right, is really all about, okay, so I thought about this for a long time. And I've got a great idea, but you have to do something with it. And so, that's often where things kind of fall down, right? So making sure you've got the, the right resources or scope or people you can leverage to actually do something and try to solve some part of it. Not the entire thing, but just at least some part of it. That's how you grab opportunities and go, hey, look, I've got this, I built this, right? I made this. This is how you do this, right? So that's at least my approach.
I like it. Ryan asks, Tatiana, oh, I said I identify as Guilfoyle in the show Silicon Valley. Matt, which character do you relate to the most on the show?
Oh, that's a bad question. That's a hard question. Not a bad.
There's no such things as bad questions. Come on now.
It depends on the time of day and where you are on the startup roller coaster, right?
I see.
So, oh God, I'm forgetting everybody's names right now. But sometimes you feel like the main character because you're like, oh my God, I just solved this really hard, impossible thing, or I've come up with a way to do that, right? Other times you're like, this sounds bad, but you're kind of, you've got the more marketing part, and I'm going to stretch it to say that some of those things are marketing related or can be useful in marketing. So I think I've felt like I felt resentful, right, about some other people in the area, right? Like, oh no, I could do this totally better than so and so, right? So I think it depends on the day, right? And certainly some of the challenges around raising money and understanding what some of the business people are talking about, right? Certainly some of the investors, but yeah, I think a number of them. I don't think there's any one I would identify with too much or that I want to admit to. So
fair enough. Oh, Leslie just asked the same question I had as well. You read my mind, Leslie. Bill Gates publishes a top 5 reading list every year. Do you have one, or a top 1 or 2?
Oh, God, I read so much dorky stuff.
I do too. I'm looking for recommendations. So.
Yeah, one of my former graduate students just gave me a book, and I've been reading it. And I cannot remember the name of it. It's gonna come to me. I will say that okay, so I'll go back to some important ones. History of Western Philosophy, Bertrand Russell. I really like that. I go back to it and reflect on that sometimes. Consilience by E.O. Wilson. I think that kind of changed, how I thought about, some aspects of science. I always appreciate some Ray Kurzweil. I really like hearing him speak too. But he spoke at a supercomputing conference, and I got to meet him, afterwards.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm jealous.
That was pretty neat. I have a huge pile on my nightstand. To be honest, I've got some self-help books, right? I mean, like,
don't we all?
You're in your 40s and you're like, okay, I got to know more about myself, right? I read a lot of papers that then take me to books sometimes too. So I don't know. There's a few. I'll send Leslie a better list.
Okay. Can you CC me on that too?
Sure.
Any other questions, guys? I had the book question too, so.
Yeah. Oh God.
I have like a pile in each room.
Do you really?
I'm still wading through Cryptonomicon,
okay.
Which I've been wading through for about a year now, okay. On and off between quarters. And then 100 Years of Solitude I'm reading again for like the 10th time. So
yeah. Well, that's good.
I usually get into the new books between quarters, so it's hard during, yeah.
It is. Yeah, for sure.
Questions in the chat, so the Q&A, we can go ahead and wrap it up then.
That sounds awesome. I'm gonna hand it back over to you.
Well, thank you. So we are now going to end the series, but I wanted to thank you, Tatiana, and thank you, Matt Tolentino, for coming to the series and participating interviewing and being a speaker for the event. Thank you all for joining us, everyone that joined us, everyone that asked questions. I want to thank our team, Brianna Bells. She's our Director of Event and Sponsorships, and then Ryan Moriarty. He is a multimedia content specialist, and they helped with all the technology here today. Everybody who came from the team as well, I appreciate it. So we will, please join us for our next alumni speaker series we will have on Thursday, June 11th at 6 p.m. featuring Armando Mejia, who's a community investor, a Boeing Global Engagement and veteran. And stay safe and go dogs.
Go dogs.